talk is about resource efficient websites. Usual optimizations that likely all of you know are mostly about speed. So caching plugins, image compression, asset compression, and optimized delivery. And sometimes throwing in Cloudflare is on typical lists, how to speed up, how to optimize WordPress sites. That are all methods that should work also on shitty servers. And to me and my business partners, that feels like the really baseline. You shouldn't go below that on optimization, but that is just one part. We're currently looking into how to make our websites like better and more responsible. Our clients often come from social business and NGO backgrounds, so people and organizations that try to do good in the world. And so we also try to do good in the world or avoid bad in the world through our websites. So some resources we came up so far that we should be aware of are electricity, CO2, or other emissions. Electricity, I guess it's a no-brainer. Like, we need electricity for the servers, for all the infrastructure of the internet. CO2 and other emissions are a byproduct of, for example, using electricity, especially if it's not from regenerative sources, but also keeping the whole infrastructure of the internet alive produce CO2. Bandwidth. The bandwidth and the speed of internet connections have been immensely bigger since the internet started, but most websites are still loading in similar times than like 20 years ago. We just super pack our websites instead of having extremely fast websites, which should be possible if you consider delivering a website in 2000 standards. Besides climate change, where emissions are very important to keep in mind, we are also going to peak oil. Like, oil is getting a tough resource, and cables, all kinds of plastic, the devices that we use for using the internet often require oil. Same thing with plastic. There's a big movement of getting aware of reducing the use of plastic in the going, and smartphones, other devices often use rare earth metals, which have their limits at some point. That will get a bit more clear later on. And a point that's often missed is lifetime and frustration. Websites are often easier to use for developers than for everyone else. I will get into that. That are resources that we figured out that are limited, and we are trying to collect ways to be aware of that limits and to be resource efficient. Some easy steps: use a modern hoster. At the best, some that use green energy are high energy efficient and use advanced server caching. Cheap servers often are super shitty in caching, and better caching means faster delivery times. So people need to spend less time on their devices. They use less energy on the server, and altogether avoiding work is always a good thing to saving resources. A CDN is, in best case, very efficient to deliver resources. A big point for bandwidth is our media. At the best, avoid videos. At the second best, have low resolution. And at the third best, try to discourage people of viewing videos. Like, playing videos on autoplay is the worst idea ever because it's wasting so much bandwidth. Same with images, lower resolutions, avoiding decorative images. I guess that's quite clear. On the tracking tools, I heard of a US newspaper site which needed to get rid of a lot of tracking tools, or did it because of the new data protection, and their page just was 20% of the bandwidth. The tracking tools were, it was kind of a tracking tool website with news attached, and that is super stupid because it's wasting so much energy. And then I know it from my own websites, but also from other websites. It's so easy to drop in some JavaScript to have decorative elements or like some fancy looks. JavaScript uses bandwidth, but also a lot of electricity on the device. Then there are a bit harder steps. The first steps, the idea of putting it on the different pages, that is easy. You can do it kind of on every website. The steps are a bit harder. Reducing the DOM. WordPress and especially page builders and some fancy plugins producing a lot of elements on the website which are unnecessary. I'm currently in the process to write yet another plugin to get rid of all kinds of header elements that are unnecessary for the user. My favorite example is the emoji script, which I don't see any good reason to put in every page. Reducing resources with reducing the DOM will have an effect with a lot of page loads because it doesn't need to, like, it's unnecessary content. One of my favorite points is optimizing your site structure and content to take less time for people to find the information that they need. For example, if you have a website of a restaurant, put the address in and the telephone number in a reach where you can easily access this. People shouldn't need to search for search your website for the most important content. And the least time people spend on your website, they can not use a lot of electricity on your website if they're just visiting for a couple of seconds. But if they need to dig around in your website for a couple of minutes, it's more energy that's used and it's unnecessary. And a very, very good point, don't get your users addicted. In the end, don't build YouTube, don't build Instagram. Getting people addicted is obviously makes everything harder, reduces wasting more resources. Sometimes it's possible to use SVG instead of pixel images. It's just more lightweight. For everything, for a lot of reasons, especially for icons, SVG is just saving a lot of bandwidth and are faster to deliver. A point that feels right, but I don't like the idea of it, just using system fonts. Fonts are heavy or can be heavy, and system fonts are already there, and you can be sure that they're there and are in perfect shape. But it reduces a lot of design options. Quite a couple of the findings that we have are not nice. They are, like, if you read them, you will understand why that could be a good way to save resources, but they don't feel nice. With PWA, I guess there are a couple of good ways to use them to save resources. I don't think it's a good idea to download your whole content with the first page load, but you can have, for example, some offline pages with the most important information, especially if your site is really an important site, for example, emergency contacts. Then harder steps. Going static. There are static page generators, and we're currently heavily looking into them because static is always fastest, and like you generate them once, and you, in best case, you can just put them in a CDN, and have them delivered the fastest and the most efficient as possible. But there are also a couple of solutions for WordPress. Static word.press is a forum where a super passionate guy is collecting a couple of plugins and offering support for a lot of options. And I'm super stoked about it, and very, very curious to look deeper into that, to hopefully save a lot of build time, a lot of electricity, and maybe encourage me to build more boring websites, as static websites encourage to make, don't go for dynamic elements if there's also a possibility to solve a static. We are looking into excessive image compressions. There are, for example, tools like dithering, which actually are white and black, like a way to collect white and black dots to have kind of a grayscale image, but with less colors, so it can be more compressed. And we try to find a way to use dithered images for decorative images, so it's less pain. And I'm playing with the thought of putting a blur effect over it or something. So I guess for decorative images that can be really cool and really small. Pages should be accessible and low frustration. My dad is mentally a bit struggling as he's getting older, and watching him using the internet is like he's super frustrated often because he doesn't understand websites. And I guess that is also our responsibility, to build websites that are easy to understand and bring people to the information they need as fast and as easy and as low frustration as possible. Then a very nice thing I stumbled over is the rule of less power, which actually says it's mainly focused on programming languages, like that is where it's coming from. Use the least powerful programming language to solve a problem. But I guess it's also a good way to handle every problem on a website. Like, what is the least powerful tool I can use? What is the most compact? What is the fastest? And what is the most low-tech solution? And like, for that reason, I'm not a fan of the Jamstack, because HTML is just the easiest tool to build a website with, like plain HTML. Yeah, and I guess a lot of JavaScript solutions could be solved with CSS, with plain HTML, or with other things. So I will try to make that as my big mantra. Can you solve it with an easier solution? An interesting topic is using light and battery saving colors. I'm not convinced that that's really a thing, but I heard of it. And I intentionally made my background in a darkish color, so your displays hopefully use a little less electricity. As I said, my studies are not finished if that is really a thing. There are good reasons to believe that battery efficient colors is not an easy thing, as displays work in different ways. Yeah, and in the end, if you start to optimize and get good in optimizing, I guess a very important point is to have a far better service than every wasteful alternative to your website. As in the best case, your users will land on your page and waste less resources than on other people's pages and waste more resources. And with that, I'm reminded that I said something about rare earths and plastic and stuff. The rule of less power is also a good reminder to don't go for the most modern techniques to build websites. A lot of the most bleeding edge websites require people to buy new devices. In the best case, we are building websites which are perfectly fine on 5 or 10-year-old devices and work with really low-level technology, in contrast of building tools that are using the most bleeding-edge technologies and incent people to buy new smartphones, new laptops, new displays. And limiting your website or your app on certain devices that need to be bought new or need to be updated often is also a way to force people into wasting resources. I heard a nice story about a guy who is already into that, and he saw a woman using an old Game Boy kind of thing, which has a browser, to check a website of a public service agency, which was possible because the website was built with old-fashioned HTML, CSS, no modern stuff, no front-end JavaScript framework. And that was possible with a really shitty, slow browser and internet connection. And that is really not glamorous, but I guess it's the right way to go, to save resources, to be aware of the impact we are having as developers and the way we force technology to go. Altogether, that is a collection of a lot of ideas, inspiration we came up with in the last couple of weeks and months. Haven't implemented all of them. We start to implement some. We're very open to have conversations with you all. If you're interested in jumping on the train of more resource effective and more sustainable websites, here's my email address. Let me know if you're curious of having an exchange about it, if you know ideas, if you have inspirations. And on the bottom of the charts, you see some inspiration. Likely, Suti WP, it's a project where a guy tried to strip everything out of WordPress possible and made it low in like 7 KB, which is super awesome. Solar Low Tech Magazine is a website that is hosted on a very small, I guess, a Raspberry Pi or something that is powered by a solar panel and a battery. So they're super efficient. That is the place where we got the inspiration of dithering images from. Low Impact Organic Basics is a website that tries to put a lot of the things that I listed up there in practice. That's an online store. You can visit the original website or you can go on the Low Impact website. And the both links in the bottom are collections of great ideas, mainly provided by Wholegrain, a London-based agency, I guess, who are already 2 or 3 years in front of us and a good inspiration for us where to head with sustainable web design, as they call it. I want to keep the focus big. Thank you for your attention. I hope there have been some new thoughts for you. I'm very open to connecting, so let me know if anything of what I said was good new information and how to go on from there.
Thank you very much, Sebastian.